Thanks so much for joining me today for this presentation, Fueling Our Imagination and Creativity with Psychedelics. I'm your host, Dr. Gabrielle Pulici, and I'm so thrilled to be here sharing my story with you, a little bit about the inspiration, the imagination behind my use of plant medicine. And if you're in this room, likely you're somebody that cares deeply about creativity, probably your own creativity, and you may be thinking about how to leverage some of the medicine to break through creative blocks, to come up with innovative ideas. And it's my intention to give you some of that information so that you walk away with actionable things that you can do when you leave this presentation. Also, when I was brainstorming what to do with you, I really wanted to give you an experience. I kind of wanted to sneak mushrooms under all the chairs. I was nervous about how that might end. So I didn't do that. So instead, I'm just going to take you on a journey, just using your breath and your mind. And we're going to move slowly and mindfully together. And hopefully it will be a good trip. I promise you will be safe. Thank you for trusting me. So just drop in, find a comfortable position for your body. We're going to let go of all the hustle and bustle of South by Southwest and everything it took to get us here in this room together. I'm just going to settle into the breath a little bit, bringing your awareness to the inhale and the exhale. Softening the neck and the back and the shoulders. Just allowing yourself to settle in, feeling safe and supported by whatever you're sitting on. Allowing the mind to quiet, dropping into that liminal space, the space of daydreaming and imagination. Letting go of any stress or worry. Just feeling the collective breath and the energy of the beautiful people that have gathered in this room today. What a gift it is that we get to spend a little bit of time together exploring these topics that have a lot of meaning for us. For transformation, for creativity, for healing. I'm going to ask you a few questions that I want you to think about without too much effort. What if you could alter your perceptions and take in the world anew, like children do? Really feel into what that might feel like for you in this moment. What if you could envision a better world, create new innovations or breakthroughs, and break through any creative blocks effortlessly? Feel into what that experience might be like. What if mind-altering plants like mushrooms, mescaline, ayahuasca were the change agents that could help you do all of this? Would you be interested in taking that trip, even if it showed you things that you didn't want to see? We're going to explore some of the plants and the natural medicine that have been around for millennia, that have become allies and agents of change for me and millions of people. I'm going to introduce you to the plants that have had an impact on my life personally, And we're going to explore some of the ways that they create transformation and amplify our creative abilities. So first we're going to go back about 14 billion years ago, before there was a South by Southwest, before there was all the modern world that we're so familiar with. We're going to go back to that nothingness and that stardust from which our planet was born a few billion years ago. And life as we know it, the life that we have today, came into existence. And then about a billion years ago, a little being was born, a fungi. We actually have records of some evidence of fungi about 2.5 billion years ago, but the whole fungi that we were able to find in its complete state is about 1 billion years old. And then about 55 million years ago, primates came into existence. And they were foraging across Africa, and they were looking for food. And they found the fungi growing, and they picked them up and they ate them along the way. And they did this for about 50 million years. And over that time, the consciousness expanded, and they imagined all of the things that were possible. And they had visions, and they eventually evolved into the human experience that we have today. This is called the stoned ape theory. Is anyone familiar with this theory? Yeah. Then about 60,000 years ago, humans started foraging, cultivating, and creating plant medicines. This is during the Paleolithic era. We have evidence in the dental records and in the pottery of people collecting seeds and plants and using them for transformation, for healing, for nourishment. And they started recording some of those experiences so that they could pass it down from generation to generation. Does anybody know who this is? So about 6,000 years ago, we started to see the birth of indigenous medicine and world medicine in every culture worldwide. So we started to see Ayurvedic medicine being born, Chinese medicine being born, indigenous healing rituals using some of the plant medicines that we're familiar with today. This is Maria Sabina, who was one of the shamans of psilocybin. And this became the staple of medicine and ritual in all communities for humanity. And at this time, worldwide, you could not separate healing, medicine, spirituality, or creativity. They were synonymous in all cultures, in all practices. Your spirit was your creative force. It was your healing force. It was your life force. If it was imbalanced, there was illness. If you stopped singing, if you stopped dancing, if you stopped writing poetry, you would lose your life force. And so these things were synonymous and intertwined for centuries. We have evidence of them in the Talmud, in the Bible, in the Vedics, in Chinese medicine books. Then in the Middle Ages, we started to have our first war on drugs. We had our first wave of plant medicine, we had our first war on drugs. And we had a few hundred years of suppression and criminalization and destruction of plant medicine and indigenous healing. And these witch hunts, they took all the shamans and all the healers who were practicing these transformational tools, and it's an estimated about 1 million women were killed during this time. And at that time, there was the rise of what we know as modern medicine and modern science. And we saw a few hundred years later, the psychedelics came back, which I think is really interesting, but they came back through the sciences. We saw in the 1940s, in the 1950s, the invention of LSD, the invention of MDMA, the invention of ketamine. And so we no longer had the plant roots of the medicines, but we definitely had them as an influence on our culture and our psyche. Is anybody familiar with this video? So in the 1950s, researchers would give LSD in a cup to different people. This is a 1950s housewife. If you Google 1950s housewife, you can watch this video on YouTube. And then they would record the reactions. And so in this video, the woman's saying, "Don't you see? Don't you see?" So that's all she says pretty much for the whole video. But this is how they collected research on LSD. So LSD was invented in the 40s. This is from the 1950s. And then we see an explosion of energy, creative energy. We see it everywhere, in music, in art, in festivals, in culture. This is the second wave of psychedelics. This is all the synthetic psychedelics. And in this wave, we have Ram Dass and Timothy Leary giving LSD to everyone at Harvard, getting thrown out of Harvard and starting communes in upstate New York. We have Aldous Huxley writing The Doors of Perception. We have the Grateful Dead and the Doors and the Beatles and the Gurus. This is the time of free love, Woodstock, Jesus Christ Superstar. This was really fun. I wish I were there. I wasn't there. Kind of bummed about that. We see it infiltrate Silicon Valley. So Steve Jobs took LSD prior to inventing Apple. And he said in an interview that it was one of the most profound and important experiences of his life. And he said, what if you could see sound moving? Have you ever looked at a screensaver? Don't you feel like you're on an LSD trip when you look at a screensaver? That's where it comes from. So we see it move into Silicon Valley. One of the interesting things about psychedelics descending on Silicon Valley is they started to birth the idea of artificial intelligence, which is a hot topic here today in 2024. This is what they were trying to conjure and innovate and activate at this time using psychedelics. And ironically, I don't know if you know this, but they were starting the first internet. It was called UpHarNet. And the first commercial transaction on the first attempt at the internet was selling pot to college students. Then, about this time, I drop into the picture. That's me on the left. Those are my parents. That was 1974. This was when we started to have recriminalization of drugs. We had the next war on drugs. This is one of the advertisements from the time. This is your brain, this is drugs, this is your brain on drugs. I vividly remember this. My father was a physician, and so in our house, we worshipped medicine and we worshipped science, and the Antichrist was these recreational drugs that might give you spiritual sovereignty, self-awareness, all those things. Freedom, you know that stuff? Freedom? Yeah. So that was not allowed. So this is me, following all the rules. I went to Jesuit school. I got a PhD. I ran a high-end luxury retreat center in Silicon Valley, where all of the Googleites and Facebook folks and VC firms would come, and we would biohack them with wellness things, nutrition, hiking, no psychedelics. Only all the health and wellness things. And I look pretty shiny and happy, right? I look like a happy lady. But in fact, I was harboring so much emotional baggage, so much carried trauma. I grew up in a home that had a lot of domestic violence, and I was a mess on the inside. I looked pretty good on the outside, but I was not feeling so good. I was struggling with anxiety, I was struggling with depression, and my creativity was something I kept shoving down. Right? I kept trying to come up, kept shoving it down. I had completed a dissertation. I was trying to write a book for a very, very long time. But every time it would come up, I'd be like, I don't have time, or this is too hard, I'd shove it back down again. So I was really, really off balance. Then the pandemic came. And the pandemic burned up my life like nothing that I've ever experienced before. I mean, I had full catastrophe pandemic. I had broke up with my partner, lost my job, like was aimlessly floating. And the thing that kept coming back was the writing. The writing, it kept saying, you have to write, you have to be creative, you have to write, you have to be creative. Because that's my sole purpose. Like, I really deeply feel that my creativity is essential to my physical, mental health. It's essential to my purpose. And so I let myself burn for about 6 months. I flailed, I suffered, cried, drank a lot of tequila. And then I was like, fuck this, I'm not doing this. And I started building earth ships. So earth ships are sustainable housing that are built out of trash. We build them all over the world, they're off-grid. They collect the rain for water, they collect the sunlight for energy. And I met an amazing community of modern hippies that live in alignment with a lot of the values from the 1960s and 70s. This picture on the left is from Easy Rider. You familiar with Easy Rider? So after I finished building in Puerto Rico, I went to the academy in Taos, New Mexico, and I lived in Arroyo Seco, which is where this movie was filmed. And if you've never been to New Mexico, it's like going backwards and forwards in time simultaneously. It's the most raw, stunning, profound place on the planet. It's unbelievable. And I moved into this homestead, and I bartered work for room and board. So I dug ditches, and I watered things in the garden, and whatever we needed to do. And this was the woman that owned the property. And she's a healer. She's an acupuncturist and a homeopathy doctor and herbalist, and she is a magician with plants. She can grow anything, harvest anything, and make any kind of medicine. And there's a native community that lives across the street, and it's 3,000 years old, and they have preserved all the traditions, including their peyote ceremonies. That's peyote. And we had piles and piles of peyote. We would harvest them, we would clean them, we would prepare them for ceremony, and we would microdose on them while we worked. I never, in a million years, thought that I would meet peyote in my lifetime. I told you my story, right? I went to Catholic school, I did all the right things, I said no to drugs, and then I got piles and piles of peyote. And that's a lot of peyote. I feel like I was meant to meet peyote. It feels like a friend more than it feels like a plant. It feels like a guide, it feels like a lover, it feels like an ally. And it completely changed my life. The other thing that happened during this time was that Michael Pollan came out with his book, This Is Your Mind on Plants. And so what I realized was that peyote was coming to me during this time because the medicine was coming to everybody during this time. Everybody was rediscovering mushrooms, psychedelics. We started entering the third wave of psychedelics. I quickly went down to Guatemala to do a deeper dive into plant medicines, herbalism, permaculture, and I did something called the Ecology Academy at Lake Atitlan in Guatemala, and I did several Mayan ceremonies, and I began working with psilocybin with one of the female healers there. the thing that was so satisfying about this is that I had done a dissertation about women healers, and I had read every book that you could read about every healer, and I had researched the literature going back hundreds of years, and this was the first time that I was really immersed in what that medicine, that psychedelic medicine was, and seeing it in its natural environment. And then I did 2 ayahuasca ceremonies. That's a maloka, where you do ayahuasca ceremonies. And the book that had been harassing me for my whole life, that I could not get out of my body, finally just fell onto the page. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of having something inside you that you really want to tell. It could be a song, or a poem, or a story, and somehow you just can't get it out. Like, you keep trying and you can't, and that was my experience of this book. And after the ceremonies, it just came out complete, like a baby, like a newborn baby, and I was so grateful. And that's really when all of the dots connected for me. Creativity, spirituality, healing, this is all the same thing. So I started talking about my experience, and I started going on podcasts, and I started sharing everything that I was learning. And I ended up here last year, not on the stage, but as a participant just like you. And I thought I was the most unlikely person to ever get up on the stage and talk to you about psychedelics medicine. But I feel like so much of me sharing is really coming from a place of representation of really what the medicine wants to say. And I saw the massive impact. I mean, it was so obvious. You're here in this room. I mean, this is evidence of the massive impact of psychedelics. Psychedelics has influence in tech, in music, in art, in science, in humanitarian environments, in medicine. All of the people represented on this image, from Elon Musk to Sting to Alex Gray to Deepak Chopra, all of these people are people who have stood up in the media and said that the medicine has changed their life in some way, that it's influenced their creativity, that it has been a profound experience, that it has created more ecological awareness or human compassion or technology ideas. Everybody here and millions more have become advocates for the use of psychedelics. So in addition to coming to South by Southwest last year, I went to a dozen other conferences. Psychedelic Science in Denver, and Wonderland Conference in Miami, and I made all the rounds and I met all the people. And one sector of the community that's really interesting is MDMA is coming online. It's going to become legal. We have decades of research showing the transformational capabilities of this medicine. Right now, the only legal medicine we really have is cannabis and ketamine, but soon we'll have MDMA. Some places psilocybin is becoming legal. But the thing is that the more natural it is, the more difficult it is for us to reclaim and use it. Because it can't be financially controlled, it can't be legally controlled. You can go home right now and you can just grow your medicine in your kitchen or your closet. You don't need pharmaceuticals, you don't need permission. You can just do it, except that that's just not the way things work right now. So these medicines coming online, even though they're not the natural medicines, they're still tremendously beneficial. We have a lot of evidence to show how much they help and support physical and mental health, and I've been really impressed with the results of those efforts. So we've kind of talked about a lot of things. We started with the Big Bang and stoned apes, and then we went to Woodstock and witch hunts, and what does it all mean? Well, to me, the summary is basically these 7 ways that psychedelics impact creative thinking. It balances your mood. It enhances your wellness. I was neurotic and anxious. I microdosed for 2 years on mushrooms. I did a lot of ceremonies. I'm not neurotic anymore. I feel really good. I feel balanced. I feel grounded, genuinely happy and healthy. The other things that it does is it interrupts rumination and enhances daydreaming. Through something called the default mode network in your brain. It's that thing that when you leave the party and you're like, why did I say that thing? I can't believe I said that thing. I'm such an ass for saying that thing. That's your default mode network overworking. And the medicines disrupt that, which allows you to go into that dreamy, imaginative space and visualize new things. Once you're in that space, you can connect the dots. One of the most incredible things about my writing and then using the medicine to do the writing was seeing the patterns in my own life, in my own behavior, in my own relationships. You can imagine a world that doesn't exist yet. What is the next technology breakthrough? What's the next best musical album or painting or novel that you want to release into the world? The dissolving of the ego and the union with the mystical, you get out of this little teeny tiny meat sack that you're walking around in. You get out of these identities and these roles and these colors of your skin or your hair or bullshit, all the bullshit. You get out of all of that and you get into this larger consciousness. What makes sense for humanity? What's the larger purpose of us all being here? You get to tap into the wisdom of the plants. If you have any relationship with any plant in your life, any flower, any herb, you know what I mean. You know that you feel a relationship. There's a sentience there. Fungi have been around for 1 billion years. We've been here for 2 million. There's slime in Japan that can go through a labyrinth like no human. There's a wisdom in nature, and this is part of what you're tapping into. And then you can leverage that in any way that you want. You can increase empathy and self-awareness, which helps us to come up with creative solutions for social problems, for having compassion for other people. How do you know if this should be in your creative toolbox? You're in this room. If you're in this room, you should be using drugs. You feel suffer blocked, you feel curious, just do drugs. You've tried pharmaceuticals, you don't get the results you want, just do drugs. Action steps, educate yourself. Figure out the best drugs for you. Not all drugs are for all people. If you're on lithium, don't do mushrooms. If you have a thyroid problem, don't do ketamine. If you have heart problems, don't do ayahuasca. You need to know this. You need to know which ones you should do. Find a professional to work with. There are thousands of people now that are educated in this. Prepare with diet and lifestyle changes. The medicine is the middle. The beginning is the preparation, the end is the integration. You need all three to have a really optimal transformational experience. Any one leg that's missing is like a 3-legged stool without a leg. You want 3 legs when you're doing this. You can integrate with anything, with yoga, with therapy, with journaling, with integration circles, with dancing. But you need to do all 3 if you're going to have a really positive experience. You can call me. I will help you. I can point you towards resources, towards therapists, towards doctors, towards retreat centers. I can give you mushrooms. You can talk to me about writing. If you want to write a book, I've written a book. I just finished my 2nd book 3 days before coming here. I'm going to keep writing books because mushrooms help me write books. And now the question, we're going to go back to where we started, which is dropping into your body. Close your eyes, take some deep breaths. I've told you a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. Breathe into it. Feel into the medicines that we mentioned today. We mentioned mushrooms, we mentioned peyote, we mentioned ayahuasca, these beautiful allies that are available to us. What's calling to you? What is your curiosity? What do you want to explore? And what are you going to do now? Thanks so much for being here. I have books for sale and cards. I love you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
bear in the red jacket. This is just how to connect with Jenny. Thank you so much. If there's Melissa has books right over there. Yes, Melissa in the red jacket right here. Awesome. Thank you.
Someplace in Michigan? Yep, absolutely. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Hey, everybody. Okay. Are we good? Okay. Hey, everyone. My name is Rick Alexander. I'm an author, a speaker, and I do one-on-one work as a psychedelic practitioner and also as a spiritual director. Does that sound okay, Becca? Okay. Before I get into this, I actually want to encourage you to listen to the content. And as you do, notice what's coming up for you as you do. Like, notice what you agree with, notice what you kind of want to push back against and reject, so that it's not, so that this can lead you to a little bit of a deeper self-understanding at the same time that we're